Hi, Katzcradul here. A couple of weeks ago I showed a video where we were having biscuits for dinner, and they were square biscuits, and somebody said, please teach us how to make your square biscuits, so that's what I'm going to do today. Here in my bowl I have my flour, and preferably it's great to chill your flour and your shortening both so that you're working with them both cold. You want a big enough bowl to move your ingredients around. Here is baking powder, salt, and baking soda. You want to be sure there's no lumps in your baking soda, so if there are, just kind of press them down with your finger and break them up. Then just lighten it slightly by mixing it with a spoon. Get it all mixed in and lift it and incorporate a little air into it. And the next thing you need is a solid fat. And you can use shortening. I don't use shortening, but that's one thing a lot of women use is shortening. You can use lard. You could even use bacon drippings if you had to, and coconut oil if you wanted to, and even as a last resort you could use an oil. It's not going to make as good a biscuit, but I use lard, and here it goes in. 5 tablespoons is what goes into my recipe, and that's to 2 cups of flour. I'll post all of the ingredients below in the more info section. Like I said, it helps if both of those are chilled. So what I do is I work with my hands. I don't use a pastry cutter. I don't like using knives and forks to cut in the shortening. I like using my hands, and that's why it helps to have it chilled, so that the flour and the fat are both chilled. And what I'm doing here is I'm showing you what I do with my hands, kind of in slow motion. I do this in the bowl very, very quickly, but what I'm actually doing is I'm flattening out that fat to try to increase the surface area, because the more surface area it has on it, the more flour it's going to be able to accept. And what I want to do is flatten it out so much that it eventually just disintegrates, and I want 1 molecule of fat to 1 molecule of flour. That is ideal to get it mixed up. So here I'm going to do it very quickly by hand, and I'm actually doing it by pressing my thumb against my index finger and my middle finger. I'm flattening out that fat to get it very, very thin, and then it eventually just falls apart. I mix quickly because I want it to stay cold. If I'm called away, have a phone call or something, I put it in the refrigerator so it will stay cold. My goal is to make it look like cornmeal, and I can make this happen in about probably a minute or a minute and a half. It doesn't take very long. I'm just tossing. I'm not keeping my hot hands on any area too long, and I've just about got it worked in here. It's looking good. Just keep going until it looks like cornmeal. If you see little blobs of fat, just break those up. And here, when it's just about ready, it will gather up into a ball on my hand. I can squeeze it up and it will form a solid mass, and then if I press it, it falls apart. And that's exactly what you're looking for. That's perfect. This really saves you from having to buy Bisquick, or worse yet, buying those refrigerated, already prepared biscuits, which taste so plastic and have so many preservatives to keep them shelf stable. There's just no need. I promised you on the Homestead Honey Hour I would show you how to make some things from scratch that you would normally use a mix for, and there's just no need for Bisquick or any of those things when it's so simple to make a pan of biscuits. Here I'm adding the buttermilk, and I'm going to gently stir it in. I'm going to add it in several different splashes. I like my dough pretty wet. A lot of people work their biscuits too dry. If you don't have buttermilk, you can sour regular milk by using lemon juice or vinegar, and you can use, you can even use reconstituted powdered milk. You could use canned milk. You can use whole milk that you've added some acid to make buttermilk. And lots of people just make their biscuits with regular milk. They don't even use buttermilk, but I think it's definitely superior. So here's how it looks, and I'm just stirring just till the the dry ingredients are incorporated. I've pre-greased my pan. I just used a little bit of lard on my finger and just ran it around my pan. I'm going to scrape off my spoon here, both sides of that, and get all the get all the dough into the bowl. Here's my cutting board. You can do this on a cabinet, but my cabinet is tile, so I don't like to do it there. I do it on a cutting board. I put a generous amount of flour down because my dough is so wet. The reason I like it wet, I mean, if you like a hard biscuit that's really hard, just don't use as much liquid and just work and work and work the flour and develop the gluten, and then you'll get a nice hard tough biscuit. If you want it very fluffy and very airy, then you work it the least amount that you have to and work it plenty wet. So I'm just going to turn this over a couple of times. Here is where the gluten is developed. If you need it, you're going to develop the gluten, which you don't want in a biscuit. When you're working just the shortening and flour together, like I showed you in the bowl before, it's impossible to develop gluten that way. It doesn't happen until you add the liquid. Then once you start messing with it, you will develop the gluten. So my goal here is just to shape an area of dough about as big as my pan, and I've done this a lot of times, so I pretty much know exactly the shape of that pan, and this is the perfect amount of biscuits for us. Actually, it will feed us for a meal and then enough for a biscuit for breakfast the next morning. So I like the shape of that pretty good. I do put a little extra flour on top so that I can cut it. Here I'm making sure that it's just the size of my pan, and of course it is, because I've done this a lot. So now I'm just going to take a butter knife. Here I'm explaining that if you, I mean, I'm not opposed to cutting a traditional circular biscuit, but if I do, then there's waste. When you cut in a circle, the place in between the circles, you either have to reshape that into another biscuit, which then is tougher, or if I do it, I just put those little scraps of biscuits on the pan as well. Here I'm just cutting it with a knife. You can see how damp it is in the middle. I cut it in 3 columns long ways, and then here it goes. Makes 12 biscuits this way. I just get a little flour off the bottom because you remember I pretty heavily floured the bottom of that cookie sheet. If they stick, just recut. And if you pull off a little piece, it doesn't matter because they're so wet, you can just push them back together. It does take just a little bit longer to cook than a dry biscuit because you're going to evaporate some of that moisture out. That one really tried to fall apart. No problem, just push it back together, and you'll notice when the pan comes out of the oven, you won't even notice those little imperfections right there. But that's the price you pay when you want to make a tender biscuit. You do have to leave it kind of wet. So I'm going to get these all cut up, and when they're all done, I'll show you how that looks. We like biscuits not only for breakfast, but we like them for dinner too. I think you saw one of my videos probably where I made cream chicken on biscuits. I think that's where somebody saw my square biscuits, but they're great. Tonight we're going to use them with a sausage gravy, and I'm posting that in another video just behind, either ahead or behind of this one. You can go look on my channel and I'll show you how to make that biscuit gravy. But there they are. You can dot the top with butter if you want them golden brown, or brush them with milk. I just don't think it's necessary. There's enough fat in the biscuit already. So here they are coming out of the oven. I want the top to be lightly browned. Like I said, if I had brushed them with oil or butter, they would be much more brown, but I just don't think that's necessary because tonight I'm going to put a cream gravy on it anyway. So that's how they look. You can't even see the imperfections. Just run your little spatula around the outside to loosen that first biscuit. It's always the toughest one to get out. There we go. Look how nice and golden brown it is on the bottom. It's just how I want it to look. This is Prepare's little plate. I'm going to open it up and let you see how light and airy it is on the inside and how easy it is to cut open. I don't like the bottom of my biscuits that are left in the pan to get the least bit soggy, so I turn them out onto a rack so that the bottoms stay nice and crisp. And I hope you give this a try. It's so simple. You don't have to have that prepackaged stuff. Try making your own square biscuits, and if you want to get really crazy, just go ahead and cut them round. Katzcradul.